So recently, I've had a lot of guys that I've been talking to telling me that women are hypergamous by nature, that they only want your resources, and that just relationships in general are totally screwed in the West for a number of different reasons. You know, some people point to feminism, other people point to hormones, other people point to social media, and I think that there's a conglomerate of a lot of the reasons as to why. However, what I've noticed with the problem with this idea is that people assume that there is just a specific level of relationships and that's all they will ever be. So today what I want to talk about is this idea of a relationship hierarchy. And what I mean by a relationship hierarchy is I'm going to use this image of a pyramid here. And so what we're going to look at is that depending on how much inner work you've done on yourself, depending on how much healing you've done, self-awareness, self-reflection, um, basically just inner work in general is going to determine the quality of your character, is going to determine the quality and the foundation of your relationships. And when you harness in those types of characteristics and you embody those kinds of characteristics, you're naturally going to magnetize higher consciousness, better quality people in your lives. And so it's important to note that within this hierarchy that I'm creating is that if you go to a higher level of hierarchy, but you have no foundation, you have no base, you're just kind of floating in the air and you're kind of spacey and there's not really going to be any kind of foundation that you have. And conversely, if you go down to and you only stay at the foundation, you're going to look at life and you're going to look at men and women as just basically primal animals that only operate on low level societal conditioning that is often played with a lot of shadow and a lot of trauma and a lot of low conscious behavior. And so within this presentation, I'm going to present this idea that if you really want to have a full stack relationship, you have to have all of these layers and these levels. And that if you only stay stuck on one of these levels, you're going to be missing the mark. You're going to not really feel the whole sense as to what it really actually means to be in a really healthy, good relationship. So let's check this out. So the first level that we're going to be looking at is primal level, a primal level of relationships. And what does this mean? Well, we can see a primal level of relationships in a lot of the developing world, right? So I wouldn't necessarily call Colombia a developing world, but currently I'm in Colombia right now. And I notice that it's a very primal type of environment. Like a lot of the women that are here, I have countless people warn me. They say, hey, look, the women here are only interested in your money. They're going to use you. They're going to manipulate you. Like my cousin, for example, she's got men from Australia and Greece and the United States just sending her money, and they don't know that she's got other boyfriends and that you got to be careful. And so this is not like what's happening to me. This is what I see other people telling me. I don't have these experiences because I've done the inner work on myself, and then therefore I don't really attract those kinds of relationships in my life. And the same is same for you who's ever watching, is that if you do the inner work on yourself and you develop a sense of discernment, you too are not going to be experiencing these kinds of relationships, but they exist and you have to be conscientious of these relationships. So what are the memes or these ideas around these primal relationships? Well, it's based on survival, right? So it's like, I need that woman to carry on my genes, right? So she's got the biggest ass, she's got the biggest boobs, so she's going to be great to carry on my genes. So I have to go have sex with her and put a baby in her so that I can continue to carry on my legacy and my lineage. And it doesn't matter if I take care of her or whatever, as long as I'm putting my seed out there, right? So super primal, super basic. There's a sense of codependency, like what I was explaining to you with some of my friends, my Colombian friends, describing me their experiences with their friends, kind of manipulating and using men for their money or for their resources. There's a sense of codependency. It's like, I need you to take care of me and vice versa, right? So in this game, in this primal game, it's very based on who's the strongest, who's the tallest. The best genes win out, basically. It's a very social Darwinian kind of mentality and ideology. So the women only have sex with the alphas. They only want to go with the people that are the tallest and the strongest or have the most resources, right? So this is where we get a lot of this red pill dogma, right? This is why all of these red pill podcasters are railing on this type of relationship. It's like women are only going to use you, they're going to distract you. It's like, well, no, that's really not actually the case. If women have not done inner work on themselves, then yeah, they're going to do that, and they're going to operate in the survival level. But it's the same with men. Like if men only view themselves with their value of I give and I provide and I protect, and that's all they see in a relationship, then yeah, of course they're probably naturally going to attract these kinds of women too. And so this is where we get this idea of hypergamy, right? So so for those that don't know this idea of hypergamy, it's women only date across social strata or up social strata. And so, yeah, so you get this ideology within primal relationships. And this is why, I mean, it's real. A lot of these things are real, they do exist, but only at a very primal level. And if you don't move up in the hierarchy, if you don't work on yourself, you're only going to be stuck at this level. You're only going to be meeting women that are interested in hypergamy. You're only going to be meeting you're only going to be meeting women that are interested in hypergamy, and you're only going to be meeting men that are just trying to bang you, right? And so, yeah, if this is the way that you're operating on this level, this is the people that you're going to meet. And so, with this level, it's very status oriented for men. So, it's like, I only date that woman because she's hot, or I only date that woman because she does kinky sex with me, or I only date that woman because she cooks and provides and takes care of me and just sits down and shuts up and makes me feel like a man, right? So it's in this kind of relationship, it's very much about like controlling the woman, and then the woman's like, I'm just going to use my raw sensuality and sexuality to manipulate you out of money and resources, right? So a lot of this as well. So that's why I mentioned this idea of safety and status oriented for women. It's like if you're with a man that has a lot of money or has got a Ferrari or whatever, that in a modern day world is going to make you feel safe because you have status, and then therefore you're with a powerful man, and then therefore they have good genes, and then therefore you can be able to take care of your progeny because they're going to pay for it through child support, right, or something like that. Now, a lot of this stuff is trauma programming, trauma oriented. So this is the masculine wounds, this is the feminine wounds, right? So masculine wounds being you're only valuable if you provide. Women are you're only valuable if you're hot and you put out, right? So a lot of this is trauma, societal conditioning that has been forced upon either society, impressing this upon people's minds through some type of dogmatic religion that was violently enforced, or through just basically survival, like the trauma of being in a survival situation, right? So again, this is the feminine and the masculine wounding. This is operating on deep archetypal trauma that has become normalized within the society, and the reason why people behave at this level is because they're operating on wounding, and and so if you heal and work on the wounding, then you're not going to be operating on that wounding. And so we're going to be able to get up into the higher tiers of relationships. And the last part is that commitment is conditional. This is really, really important thing. It's like women are going to leave you if you stop providing. If you stop paying for the rent, they're going to leave you. Or, if she stops putting out, or she stops having sex with me, or whatever, she stops giving me what I want, then I'm going to cut her off, right? So commitment is conditional within primal relationships. So this is the ideology that a lot of people that are wounded and traumatized operate on, and this is a lot of what you see on social media talking about. And this is a very real thing. It's a thing that exists in many parts of the world, especially parts of the world that are struggling with poverty or violence or trauma that has happened within a nation. So, for example, like because I'm in Colombia at the moment, FARC. For those of you guys that don't know FARC, they were like a paramilitary kind of group that were sort of like semi-terrorists, and they were just wreaking havoc on people in the community. And then, of course, you have the famous Pablo Escobar. So a lot of the drug cartels that were going on in like the 90s and a little bit earlier than that. So you kind of have this cultural and national wounding, which influences people at this level. So it's important to recognize that national and cultural wounding also plays into this type of primal mindset that people fall into if they're not conscientious of it, right? But the good news is that this is not how relationships are actually supposed to be, and that if you do inner work on yourselves and you become aware of these kinds of levels and these tiers, then you start to get into healthier relationships. So let's go on to the next level of what I call within the hierarchy. So this is the emotional level, right? So you can see a lot of this within religious society. So the memes or the ideas of this are cooperation, right? So it's very much based in gender roles, right? So I'm the man, I provide and protect. You're the woman, you submit to me, and you let me lead, right? So that's a very healthy kind of middle of the ground relationship, but it's still based in separation of the polarities and oftentimes based in dogma. And if we haven't done enough work on ourselves, it can be viewed as a woman as a secondary to a man, that she's somehow a second class citizen, right? So, but this is where we get into this idea of morality, right? So there's an emotional connection. It's not just about you serve me for sexual means or you serve me for financial means, but there's a genuine desire to be self-sacrificing to one's spouse, to one's family. There's an emotional connection. It's not just based on conditional things, but it's based on and a desire to be loving and serving to other people. So there is a basic level of love and respect. You're going to respect that person and for their flaws, and you're not going to hold that against them. And it's not going to be conditional, like, oh, you messed this up, so then therefore I'm going to cut you off, or I'm just going to turn you away because you're a terrible human being, right? So with this, instead of commitment being conditional, this is commitment is an obligation, right? So I am married to this woman, and it's God's word to help me be committed until death do us part, right? So that doesn't matter if she's cheating on me with other men or there's other terrible things happening in my life. Covenant is the way that it has to be, and irrespective of what's going on or whether we want to rip each other's heads off, it's an obligation for me to do this. So this is where it comes with the dogmatized self-sacrificing. And again, there is still a sense of structure within a relationship that creates some kind of safety, but it doesn't necessarily allow somebody to be able to actualize themselves. And it doesn't really allow somebody to be able to explore other ideas or other senses of polarity. It's kind of rigid, but it also creates a sense of connection and basic love and respect for one another. And yeah, these relationships are a lot more harmonious in a sense. It's not like you have to always be on guard about who's going to take advantage of me or who's going to rip me off or who's going to use me, right? So there's more of a societal and a religious pressure to be able to kind of keep this traditional. This is a nuclear family kind of relationship, right? I know that in most nuclear families, they get involved or they get into relationships to play out specific gender roles, but those gender roles are not necessarily based in discovering higher aspects of consciousness or actualization. It's really just playing out a role so that each person feels a sense of safety or security, right? So in this one, commitment is an obligation, right? Based out of gender roles or perhaps religious implications or something like that. All right, so let's look into the last one. Now, this is what I call an awakened relationship. What does an awakened relationship mean? Well, we see these types of relationships with people that have done a lot of inner work that I had mentioned earlier on in the video. So what are the memes around awakened relationships? Well, we look into these idea of transcendence, right? Transcending the human experience. And we get into more mystical experiences. We get into more rapturous states of love. We look at holistic relationships. So I'm not seeking this woman to specifically play out a gender role. I'm not seeking this man to specifically play out a gender role. I understand that we both have the capacity to play out both of these gender roles, but I'm biologically more inclined to play out this kind of gender role, and that doesn't make me less of a person. It just means that it's just easier for me. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. That's your choice. But we sort of become more at peace with who we are biologically and emotionally and evolutionarily, but we still see each other as equally worthy of love and respect and presence. So with this, we see sexual and romantic relationships as a way to realize godhood, right? I don't like to use this idea of godhood, like you become your own god, but it's a way of using healthy sexuality through tantra and through healthy sacred sexual practice to be able to reach higher levels of self-love and self-acceptance and self-healing. This is where we get the idea of sexual healing from, and be able to go into types of rapturous states of love and devotion. And we see the other person as a reflection of our desire to be of service, not only for a higher power, but for each other. So this is where we get this idea of devotion. We are devoted to each other, and commitment becomes an honor. It's like, I'm honored to be of service to this woman, and this woman is honored to be of service to me. And there's this high level of integrity, high level of respect, high level of self-sacrifice, but it's not out of obligation. It's out of, I genuinely want to be self-sacrificial to you because I see you as a beautiful, worthy being that is experiencing this incredible state of union and bliss and devotion. And that kind of mentality, when you look and you behave and you interact with your partner, that is a form of a path to enlightenment. And so when we're in that kind of devotion to each other, for men, it's naturally going to awaken the muse. So the woman becomes the muse. She becomes your inspiration. She becomes your desire to genuinely be of service to her, to the family, and to the world. And vice versa. She desires to be of service to you and her family and the world. And it becomes a mutual thing. So you become more masculine. And as she becomes more masculine, she can relax into her femininity. And as she relaxes into her femininity, that inspires your masculinity. And so it just becomes this positive upward spiral of inspiration and communion and relationship. And so, but what's interesting about this is that if you get out of that relationship, it's okay. It's not like you're losing somebody or something. It's like you yourself are whole yourself, but you realize that there's an equally awesome and beautiful benefit to being in a relationship that with somebody that is equally as whole as you, right? And so that is what I call an awakened relationship. And there are many, many, many people that are operating on these levels of relationships beyond the primal and beyond the emotional too. But remember that the foundational key point that you need to consider is that you have to begin to do the inner work on yourself. You have to begin to realize how you've been traumatized by society, how you've been conditioned by society. What are your cultural and national shadows that are that are influencing the way in which you think and which you feel? Do you come from a very hyper individualistic society like I do from the US? So that means it's like my will is the most important. It's all about me, and I don't really care about my father or my family. I just put my father or my mother in their old folks home when they become a burden to me, and it's really all about me, 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 me. So, but then that has a negative influence on you when it comes to when things really get bad in your life, or you go bankrupt, or somebody in your family dies and you need somebody to be able to take care of you. We in hyper individualistic societies, we sort of lose that kind of importance to the family and to blood, and to blood is everything, like family is everything. You get a lot of those in very, much more collectivist cultures, right? But conversely, if you're in a very collectivist culture, it stifles individualism, it stifles innovation, it stifles you from being able to break out of your box and perhaps go a path that is truly authentically who you know that you have to be, but you're worried about societal pressures, about what your family or what society will think about you. So these are just some of the things that your national and your cultural things influence you with your shadow or with your traumas. And so any kind of inner work, whether that's inner child wounding or focusing on how your national shadow has influenced you, or perhaps relationship or sexual trauma or mental or emotional abuse from narcissism or emotionally unavailable parents or poverty, or any of these kinds of influences that have influenced you in your formative years when you were growing up, is going to be influencing the way in which you view other women and other men in your relationship. So remember, it's very, very important to do inner work on yourselves if you want to be able to transcend what a lot of people are complaining about within these kinds of red pill movements, and also feminist movements, because a lot of feminist ideology is that men are shit, men are terrible. Not all of it, but a lot of it has that influence on the way in which women think. And so it's very, very important for us to be able to deeply, objectively self-reflect on ourselves. Really, really actively seek out conflicting information for what you believe. If you very strongly hold this idea of this is this way and it always has to be this way, seek constantly to challenge your own understandings of things, because then you're probably going to be able to realize that, man, maybe I'm a little bit hypocritical, and that maybe I do need to integrate a lot of these things that I have not been paying attention to in my own life. And when you do that, then you're going to move up into the emotional and to the awakened relationships. So yeah, don't worry, there's hope. And the cool thing is that everybody can do this, but not everybody does this, right? So it's what is it? Many are called, but few are chosen, right? So if you're watching this video, you have to be the example, and you have to be able to articulate and communicate about these types of hierarchies with other people if you're giving up hope on relationships in general. So yeah, I look forward to you guys in another video, and thanks so much for joining.